Our group is formed by Alejandro Urquijo, Julian Morales, and David Hill. We are the group number 1, and let's talk about the realism. Our table of contents, we start with the beginning of the topic with the summary, introduction, general aims, and specific aims. After we continue with picked topics, we choose classical realism, structural realism, the contemporary realist challenges, and the neoclassical realisms. At the end, we talk about the statism, survival, and self-help.
Realism is the dominant theory of the international relations because it provides the most powerful explanation of the state of war, that is, the usual condition of life in the system. Realism, although, is the oldest theory of the international relations. It continues to explain the functioning of the states and the functioning of the international actors. Realism establishes that all states exist on an international stage and focus on the struggle for power. Therefore, the interest of each state is the main factor for this theory. For this reason, in this presentation, different forms and types of realism will be carried out, such as classical realism, structural realism, and neoclassical realism. Finally, aspects that define realism and characterize it, such as self-help, survival, and statism, will be developed. Realism is born from the great struggle against the idealism after the period of wars. The result of this great debate is that the realism were victorious, and since that victory, many theorists and many political leaders have continued to see the world through realism theory. Realism focuses on interest rather than ideology and on peace through force. According to realism, each state actor is responsible for ensuring its own well-being and survival. This theory focuses on the foreign policy of countries, since it deals with issues related to the capacity of the states, related to state security, and the relationship with the another international actors. The behavior of the states depends of their position in the international system, where various factors are taken into account, such as international power and arms capacity, military power, and finally, the economic power. The general aim of this presentation is to explain what is realism, since the perspective of different authors, and how it has developed throughout the history, with the different types and forms of the realism. The specific aims of this presentation will be based on: first, analyze how the theory has evolved from classical realism to neorealism. Second, determine the factors and main characteristics of realism. Identify the main interest of international actors according to the theory of realism. And finally, understand the variables that develop realism, which are self-help, survival, and statism. The first topic of this presentation will be classical realism, which will help us to understand key concepts of this theory, based on authors such as Morgenthau, Machiavelli, and Thucydides. The second topic will be structural realism, that focuses on the international system and the state security. For this topic, authors like Rousseau, Wolmarch, and Mearsheimer will be taken into account. The third focus of these presentations will deal with the main challenge of contemporary realism, where topics such as power distribution and the anarchy international system will be discussed. The fourth theme will focus on neoclassical realism, which criticizes structural and classical realism and provides a new way of understanding this theory. Finally, the last topic will be the three S, which are statism, survival, and self-help. I'm gonna explain classical realism. This theory is the first of international relations that studies and analyzes the nature of states, their behavior, and relationships with other power-based states. Realism seeks to apply a model that is useful for all states and international actors. This theory has as its background three main theories, which are Thucydides, Morgenthau, and finally Machiavelli. This author tells us that the state needs to maintain its hegemony to increase its power and therefore have security. The author tells us that the strong country or strong state should rule over the weak state as they have more power and more capabilities. One of the main affirmations of Thucydides is that the states live in constant fear of being attacked or be betrayed by other actors of the international system. Therefore, his main foreign policy is focuses on the maintain the security. Hans Morgenthau focuses his analysis on power and national interest. This author considers that a state have a desire to dominate or influence the behavior of other actors. Therefore, the conflict of interest is what leads to the struggle for power or supremacy. Morgenthau focuses on Hobbesian thinking, that the nature of men explain the conflict in the system, that is, the people being individual and thinking about his own benefit, and acts in a rational way in order to have his own benefit. On the other hand, this author mentions that the international system is characterized by anarchy. That means that each state is responsible for its survival and its own well-being. Therefore, defense and military power is the main interest of the state. The power for Morgenthau. Power is a combination of influence and coercive force. For Morgenthau, power is defined in two components. First, the material, and second, the relational. Material. For Morgenthau, the material component focuses on the military capacity, economic power, and survival capacity of the states. Second, the relational, it focuses on the influence that a state has in a political terms. For Machiavelli, states act through the principle of national interest. For the author, the stability of a political regime depends on maintaining order, both internally with the laws and externally with the weapons. These weapons will be important to maintain the strength of the state, and thus maintain the laws and the peace, since having good weapons, the another states will be intimidated and will not be willing to enter in conflict. The balance of power refers to the limitation and dependence of the power of the states. This concept mentions that when a state increases its power, the other states act against it to decrease its power and balance it to maintain the status quo. On the other hand, the balance of power refers to stability of the states within the international system.
For the structural realism, the structural realists agree that international politics is important in a power struggle, but they don't attribute this to human nature. Instead, structural realists criticize competition for security and interstate conflict outside of a dominant authority over the states. This theory studies the structure of the international system, considered anarchic, and how states interact based on their capacities and power. The international anarchy is a theory of international relations. It describes that the world system lacks mandatory global authorities or jurisdictions. There is no universal sovereign or world government. Every system has a structure, internal organization, and interaction among states. Walls consider the international system as a wall, and the central point is the international system has a structure that determines the behavior of the states within the system. Then, Wall define the structure of international system in terms of three elements. First, the structure of the system determines the behavior of international states. We must understand that the structure of the international system is anarchy, and that every structure has a computer principle that gives its characteristics that determine as the parts of the system are organized. Second, the units that make up the systems are the states. The states have some functions, and the international system is characterized by functional similarity. In the states have a hierarchy, and third, the distribution of power or capabilities among the states. Rawls argues that the states, especially great powers, have to be sensitive to the capabilities of other states. The possibility of any state using force to advance its interests makes all states worry about survival. According to Walls, power is a means to the end of security. In other words, instead of being power maximizers, according to Walls, states are security maximizers. Walls argues that power maximization often turn out to be suboptimal because generate a coalition of states that upset the equilibrium. Mearsheimer differs from Walls when he describes the behavior of the states. He separates the offensive realism with the defensive realism from the Walls. On the question of how much power states want. According to Mearsheimer, the structure of international system forces the state to maximize the, their position of the relative power. Under anarchy, he agrees that self-help is the basic principle of action, but Mearsheimer argues that states can never be sure of the intention the other countries or the other states. Consequently, Mearsheimer concludes that all states continually seek opportunities to gain power at the expense of other states. In fact, the ideal position, although one that according to Mearsheimer is impossible to achieve, is to be the global hegemony of the international system. However, because global hegemony is impossible, he concludes that the world is doomed to perpetual competition between the great powers. Challenge of contemporary realism to structural realism. While structural realism attributes the behavior of the state to the anarchic international system, some contemporary realists are skeptical of the notion that the distribution of power can sufficiently explain the behavior of states. The relative distribution of power is an important influence on the behavior of the states, as are factors such as the perceptions of state leaders, the relationship between the state and society, and identity of the state. An important variable that intervenes is the leaders themselves. That is how they perceive the distribution of power. Neoclassical realists will argue that the fact that Germany was a revisionist state in the 1930s, the status quo since the end of World War II, is fundamental in understanding the role in international system. Not only do states differ in terms from their interests, they also differ in terms on their ability to extract resources from the societies they rule. Neoclassical realists argue that the states have different capacities to translate various elements of national power into state power. While the structural realists assume that everyone has similar interests, the neoclassical realists argue that their answer is that this not is the case. He argues that with respect to walls, the assumption that all states lean toward security results in realism exhibiting a basis of status quo.